She raised her hand and caressed his face, scorching heat spreading into her palm. Silver and black eyes gazed into each other. Roswitha parted her red lips, her voice husky and languid after everything they had just done, yet still carrying the irresistible authority of a queen. Her words struck straight to the heart. "Kiss me," Leon chuckled, deliberately teasing her. He gently brushed his finger tips across her burning cheek. The pad of his finger grazed her lower lip, making her tremble softly. Amusement colored his voice. "Do you want me to kiss you that badly?" Roswitha glared at him, refusing to yield in the slightest. Instead, she leaned closer, until the tip of her nose nearly touched his. Even her breath was warm. She countered with complete confidence. "Don't you want to?" Leon's gaze drifted downward and settled on her lips, slightly reddened from being bitten. Then he slowly lifted his eyes again, his deliberately unhurried expression making it obvious that he intended to keep her in suspense. "Was what we just did still not enough to satisfy you?" Roswitha let out an irritated little huff. A soft, breathy sound escaped her nose, full of stubborn frustration. Even her cheeks puffed up. Deciding she had nothing left to lose, she grabbed his collar and yanked him down, the motion carrying a touch of coquettish impatience. Her words were crisp and direct, without the slightest attempt to beat around the bush, exactly like her usual personality. "I want you to kiss me. So stop talking nonsense." Leon raised an eyebrow. He gently pinched her chin between his fingers, forcing her to look at him. He drew out the last syllable, his tone playfully wicked, which only made her angrier. "Is that how you ask someone for a favor?" Leon knew perfectly well how to handle Roswitha, and naturally, Roswitha knew a few of his little tricks too. Roswitha bit her lip. Her eyes darted around, as though she had guessed what he wanted to hear. Instead, she deliberately lifted her chin in challenge, a mischievous gleam flashing in her eyes. "Then, what kind of attitude do you want? Should I call you husband?" She refused to believe that he would actually be shameless enough to accept. But to her surprise, Leon's eyes instantly lit up, and his grin grew even more wicked. He leaned down close to her ear, his warm breath brushing over its sensitive tip. His voice dropped to a low whisper, carrying an intoxicating allure. The ticklish sensation made her ear go numb. "Go on then. Say it, little dragoness." A smile played on Roswitha's lips as she gently pinched Leon's ear and leaned closer. "I refuse." Before Leon could speak, Roswitha parted her lips slightly and carefully caught his earlobe between her pearly teeth. It was a delicate, tingling sensation, with just the slightest hint of pain. Of course, Leon had no intention of letting her continue running wild. He had already been holding himself back, and now the last shred of his patience was gone. Leon let out a low chuckle, a dangerous edge lurking in his laughter. He placed a hand on her waist and pulled her closer, the heat of his palm seeping through the thin fabric. "All right. So you're biting me now? Let's see how much longer you can keep acting tough." As expected of the greatest dragon slayer, whether on the battlefield or in the other kind of battle, he always knew how to make dragons suffer. After barely managing to resist for a while, the Silver Dragon Queen finally surrendered. Roswitha let out a muffled moan. Her hair was completely disheveled, and she lay limp among the flowers and grass, barely able to raise a hand. Even her fingertips were tingling and numb. She sighed inwardly. As expected of the greatest dragon slayer, his stamina recovered ridiculously fast. Just a few hours ago, he had looked utterly drained as he sat beneath a tree in the rain. So how did he suddenly have the endless energy of a bull? Considering how hard he had been traveling these past few days, and how he had forced himself to carry on despite his injuries, she would pretend to be weak for a little while, and let this foolish captive enjoy being king of the household. Once they returned to the Silver Dragon clan, she would have plenty of ways to put him in his place. Letting him enjoy himself for a few days was no big deal. Roswitha was busy plotting inwardly, but her voice softened, taking on a tearful pleading note. I was wrong, Leon. I'll never do it again. It was rare to see Roswitha looking so pitiful, but it was more than enough to leave the man above her completely entranced. Leon lowered his gaze and watched her submit. Inside he was already bursting with delight, but outwardly he continued putting on airs. He raised an eyebrow with feigned seriousness, and brushed aside the strands of hair stuck to her cheek. So now you know you were wrong? Roswitha hurriedly nodded, her head bobbing like Akik pecking at grain. Her hair became even more tangled, and bits of grass clung all over her face. She looked both disheveled and adorable. I won't force you to kiss me anymore. The moment the words left her mouth, Leon lowered his head, and she led her lips with his, swallowing everything else she had meant to say. Caught completely off guard, Roswitha let out a muffled hum. She reached up and gave him a light punch, but there was no strength behind it. If anything, it looked more like a half-hearted attempt to resist. After another prolonged entanglement, Leon finally pulled back slightly. He gazed at the reddened corners of her eyes and her glistening lips, clearly still having no intention of letting her off. He twirled astrand of her hair twice around his finger, then slowly reminded her, a devious smile hidden in his voice. What are you supposed to call me now? Roswitha rolled her eyes inwardly, mercilessly mocking him in her head, though none of it showed on her face. HMPH. Now he's really putting on an act. Give him an inch, and he takes a mile. He's shrilly starting to think he's somebody. But despite her complaints, she still softened her voice and mumbled the word. Her voice was so faint that it was nearly carried away by the wind. There was a perfunctory note to it, making her reluctance painfully obvious. Husband. Leon was clearly dissatisfied with that answer. He shook his head, then raised a hand and gently straightened her face. His thumb lightly brushed the corner of her lips, making her look him directly in the eyes. His tone carried a seriousness that left no room for refusal. Look at me and say it again. Roswitha felt utterly helpless. The little version of herself inside her mind stood with her hands on her hips, grumbling nonstop. Go on, keep acting smug. After all, if you don't do it now, you won't get another chance. Just wait until we re-back with the Silver Dragon clan. Then you'll see how I deal with you. I'll make sure you learn who's really in charge. But regardless of all her inner complaints, she still raised her eyes and met Leon's gaze. Her long eyelashes trembled, fluttering gently like butterfly wings. She drew out the final syllable in a soft, almost coquettish tone, and called him that once more, her voice so sweet it could melt Apperson's bones. Husband! That single word sent Leon into instant ecstasy. He almost burst out laughing on the spot. It took an enormous effort to keep his expression under control and maintain his composed facade. But the joy in his eyes was impossible to hide, and the corners of his mouth were nearly stretching to his ears. Inside, he was already beside himself with delight, his heart bouncing around like a little rabbit. All that effort finally paid off. That was so satisfying. He cleared his throat and spoke with forced composure. His tone was breezy, as though he did not care in the slightest. Only the red-and-ed tips of his ears betrayed how he truly felt. "All right. Let's finish in 1 more hour,"